Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Machan Leira Online Smicha. We know that on Shabbos and Yom Tov it's a mitzvah to eat meat. And originally the Zman Shabbos and Migdash HaYakayim was actually a chiyuv, a mitzvah, because of the Ein Simcha L'Babasa V'Yayin, and the Basa was the Shalmei Simcha, the Karbanis. Today's days, Nabach, we don't have the Karbanis, so it's a mitzvah to eat meat as a zeicher for it. And it's a luxurious item. That's how you enhance the Yom Tov. There are certain times of the year where there's also, we stress eating dafka milchiks. We have it on the Yontif. As we know, Shavuos, there are many reasons why we're makbid to eat milchiks on Shavuos. And then, from the other hand, we know, for example, on the 9 days, there's no mitzvah to eat milchik, but you're not supposed to eat meat during the 9 days of the beginning of the month of Av. So today we're going to discuss some of the halachas when you're not allowed to eat, or when you're insisting there's Indian to eat milchiks. What halachas are there? And we know with meat there's many halachas. There's shchita, there's chaylev, there's dam. There's so many halachas with meat. After you eat meat, you're fleishik. Are there any halachas that you should be aware of if you're milchik? So the Alter Rebbe, when he speaks about the halacha of the minig of eating milchiks on Shavuos, you have to know that the Alter Rebbe says in Siman Tov Tzadik Dalid Seif Tes Zayin, he says like this: it is customary to eat milchiks the first day of Shavuos, uminig avesenu Torah, and this custom is a Torah, so we try to keep it, and especially, says the Alter Rebbe, there are many reasons given, and I once gave a shiur about the many reasons that are brought, lechem aponim, many beautiful lessons. The comparison to milk and the Shavuos is that we're like babies just born, and we're receiving the Torah fresh. There are many beautiful lessons. But you always have to remember that eating milchiks on Shavuos is only a minig. Since at the same time there's a mitzvah to eat meat on every Yom Tov, so then the Alter Rebbe says you have to be aware. You have to be careful. You must eat. It's a mitzvah to eat meat. It's a minig to eat milchik. So the Alter Rebbe gives you footnotes. He tells you references, what to check up, what to do before you are about to eat the milchik meal. So he says, make sure that you don't transgress the isser of basa b'chalav. So therefore, Yasu Kakasuv B'Yeredeya Siman Pei Ches Upei Tes. The Alter Rebbe says, study up, again, review Siman Pei Ches in Yeredeya, which is the Isser of a Ha'alah, when different food items could be at the same time at the same table, because if you're in the eating mode, and you're fleishik, you can't eat milchik. You're milchik, you can't eat fleishik. So there's a concept of Isser Ha'alah, not even to be on the same table at the same time. That's Siman Pei Ches. And then the Alter Rebbe says, study Siman Pei Tes in Yeredeya. That's the issue of once you eat meat, you can't turn around and eat milchik. You have to wait 6 hours, and all the halachas, if you eat milchiks first, if it's hard cheese, all these difficult halachas in Siman Pei Tes. And there's a very important Darkei Tshuva you have to learn, that how does a person juggle to make milchiks and fleishiks? You can't just have a milchik meal, because you're supposed to have fleishik in every meal. How do you juggle this with the 6 hours and the Kiddush and the Lechem Mishnah? So there's a Darkei Tshuva that discusses, and I have a class about that point. I'm actually not going to be discussing that issue. The Alter Rebbe goes on to speak about a thing which he doesn't put a strong emphasis. He says, V'hanoyagim, those who have the custom to bake special bread for Shavuos, and this is unique. You have lechem nilesh bechalav, bread that's kneaded with milk, or bread that's kneaded with butter. So he tells you what you should be careful. You can't have this bread and milk, in the fleishik oven. So you got to kasher the oven, and you got to be careful what paddle or what utensil you use to take it out, because this is milchik. But he just says, if your custom is to have this bread kneaded with milk, then there are side issues. Bread kneaded with milk is a major issue. Forget about the side issues of the kashering of the oven and the paddle or the shovel that you use to take out the bread. There's a clear din in Gemara, Meseches Psachim, Daf Lamed, that the Gemara says in Psachim, this is in Yeridea, Siman Tzadik Zayin, Sif Aleph, the Chachamim made a gzeira, and they said, Ein Loshin Isa B'chalav. You're not allowed to, it is prohibited to knead a dough with milk inside. And the same would be, knead a dough with fleishik fat inside. Now you have to separate these issues. There is, over here, there are 2 points with this bread, a dough, that has milk inside, or has fat, fleishik fat inside. And that is, this is not like a stir fry where you see everything on your plate. You see what's there. You see pieces of meat. When it's a hidden ingredient in a isa, in a dough, that you'll never know once the product is finished. That's point number one. Point number two, it doesn't necessarily apply in every food item that you're not allowed to do so. This is perhaps unique about an isa, about a dough, about a bread. What's unique about that? Bread is universal and bread is interchangeable. What I mean by that is bread, you have slices of bread, and you use some for the morning breakfast, and that might be eggs and cheese. And the same bread, you'll have the other slices or the rolls for the supper. It might be hot dogs or burgers. It might be fleishik. So bread, the common view that people look at, how they look at bread, is something pariv. If you decide that you want to make it not pariv because you want to have this hidden ingredient, it's not what people know it to be. So the Chachamim say you're not allowed to make a food item which is known to be pariv and known to be used for all meals. Change that status, and that's something that's specific by bread, and therefore, ein loshin isa b'chalav. You're not allowed to make the bread also fleishik because shema yavay la'achle in basar. You might end up using that bread with meat, and you'll never know that. You'll never know it's milchik. So when the Alter Rebbe says those who do make milchik bread, how do they go against this clear din in Shulchan Aruch that you're not allowed to do so? I want to make note that in Siman Tzadik Aleph, over there we have a very close halacha to this, a very similar halacha to this, but that bread is allowed to be used sometime. Over here, this bread that has a hidden ingredient is not only obviously not allowed to be used with fleishik. If you have a milk ingredient, you're not allowed to use it with fleishik. The Chachamim were so strict with their gezerah, they don't even allow you to have it as milchik. Because this is a gezerah of Shema, we refrain, this is off the list. This is a problem that's definitely going to happen sooner or later. You're not even allowed to use this as milchik in bread. Earlier, in Siman Tzadik Aleph, Sif Gimel, the Mechaber brings a case where a person makes sandwiches, and he made salami sandwiches. So he had cold sliced bread and cold salami, and then he decides, I made too many salami sandwiches. So he wants to remove the salami and replace it with something else. Now here, while the salami was on the bread, there's also grease. There's also grease, and the grease affected the bread. In that case, the Mechaber does not say that you cannot use that bread at all. He says, over there he says, you cannot use it for cheese now. Once you remove the meat, the bread has too much meat grease on it, you can't use it for cheese sandwiches. But to continue using this for a different type of meat, you took out the salami, you put in bologna, that you're allowed to. It doesn't make the bread usher. When you made an isa, and there's a hidden ingredient part of the dough making that nobody knows, then it's not allowed to be used for nothing. Not for fleishik, not for milchik, and not for pariv. It's asur midrabanan. So how would the Alter Rebbe brings a problem that is only what to use, how to kasha the oven? And the answer is, there are two loopholes. What the Gemara says in Daf Lamed Vav, The Gemara says how you could have a cheese bread, or cheese bareka, or cheese pretzel, or anything that you can't tell necessarily that it is that is milchiks or fleishiks. And the way and what it is the Gemara says if he makes it ke'ein tura. Ke'ein tura is a machlokes between Rashi and the Rif and the many poskim. Rashi says ke'ein tura is like the eye of an ox, meaning to say it's a small amount. If you only made enough with the hidden ingredient, enough for this setting, we'll soon see there's a machlokes of poskim. What's a small amount? Is it for one meal or for one day? It's a big nafkamina. But at least more than one day, you can't, because if you're leaving leftovers from this milchig bread or fleishig bread for some other day, by then you're going to be using it for the opposite food. So if you make it a small amount, you're allowed to make even bread with a hidden ingredient. That's one shita. That's a shita of Rashi. The second shita is, you have another option. The whole problem is shema yavelach lebasar, or maybe you're going to eat it with basar. You make it visible that people should know that there's no hidden ingredient. Meaning to say, put cheese outside, or shape it ke'ein basar, make it a little different shape, and the people will see, it's shaped different. It must be it's not a regular bread. That will stop a person from eating it with other foods. So here becomes, based on this discussion, becomes a big shalos haposkim. What would be the din if it's not bread? What would be the din if it's cake, desserts? It goes on weiter. Some people back then, when they were making wine, and if the wine didn't look clear, one of the gimmicks, one of the tricks they would do is pouring a little milk in the wine, and the milk would make the wine look richer, more better for the to sell. And the question is, how do you know somebody's not going to end up drinking that wine with flesh? And that is the natural way. A lot of people drink wine with flesh. So there's two discussions with concerning desserts or wine or anything not like bread. Remember, I said before, bread is something that you eat at every single meal, and it makes sense to be eaten in fleishik. It makes sense to be eaten in milchik. So if you have a bread, you think it's parva. Cakes and biscuits and all these things, even if you don't eat it with other milks or flesh, some people, you don't eat it together. There's another issue. When you're eating the bread, you're eating the bread as part of the sandwich. So there is going to be either a milchik sandwich or a fleishik sandwich. If the bread is milchik, there's going to be chas v'shalom milk and meat in the sandwich together. The dessert or the cake, you're not eating it together. It's going to be eaten after the fleishik. So this is a machlokes. There are those that say that nevertheless, you still can't add milk into that, because eating fleishiks and milchik one after another is also not good. The Pri Chadosh, however, says that this whole halacha only applies by pas. The Isser only applies by pas, as I said before, because pas is eaten with the other food. With anything else which is not eaten with the other food, even if it's eaten after, the Gzeras Chachamim does not apply. So what are the two loopholes? Loophole number one is eat only if they made small amounts, enough for either one meal or one day, which becomes a pretty interesting halacha. The Shalos Teshuvas Marsham writes that in two cases we discussed this. We discussed this Lamashal on Shavuos. On Shavuos, it's mutter to bake on Shavuos. Yontif is a mutter eichel nefesh. So if you're baking on Shavuos, you can only bake day for day. You can't bake the first day for the second day. So when you're baking on the first day, just for the first day, then it's enough if you make that could be considered. You don't even have to make a hecker or simon, because just it's a small amount. But if you're breaking before Shavuos for both days, that's more than one day's worth. Then you'd have to make a hecker, because it's not enough. You're not just making for one day. You're not making a davar mut. Another example, which is brought in Paiskim, the Shalos Teshuvas Marsham says, if somebody baked bread with milk on it, but he did that only during the 9 days, and in the 9 days you're not eating flesh. So l'chayra, what the whole gezeres chachamim doesn't apply, because it's not going to be shema yochlenu basar. Nevertheless, we know that there are ways a person could eat meat even in the 9 days. He makes us do this mitzvah, siyum, or it'll be Shabbos, or he'll keep some of the bread after Tisha B'Av. So this gzeira is a serious gzeira that the chachamim are machmir, even in those situations, and we have to take this so serious that it's a discussion in Pesachim. What happens if this type of bread, which is usher, is lost amongst other breads? Would it continue making other breads usher? How far do we have to go with this Issur D'Rabbanan?